Howdy. This video is about Dr. Bruce Linton's 4 phases of fatherhood development. And Dr. Linton's a really cool guy. He's been working with fathers for over 30 years, running a fatherhood group, and based upon his observations of working with these fathers, he's developed this model. And he's written a couple books, which are just fantastic. And if you have the time and the space and the resources, I encourage you to check them out. Herein, we're just going to talk about his developmental model, where he identifies 4 phases. And phases sound like they're things that we move through one at a time, but really they're things that we're constantly working through in different aspects of our lives. And these phases aren't intended to be like a checklist, like I did this, and this, and now I'm done and I'm a father. Instead, these are pretty fluid. They kind of unfold for us over time because fatherhood is an evolving psychological process. And so we work through something in one way and then we encounter it again. And because we are different people, we've evolved, we've developed, we've grown, we now experience that in a new way. We view it through a different lens. And so we work through it anew. In other words, these phases are kind of lifelong developmental themes that we may have experienced before fatherhood in one way, and now we experience them differently as fathers. And so too, as we continue to grow as fathers, they become different, they evolve, they change. And so the way that you hear them today, the way that you reflect on them, might be different than you would have when you were younger. And so too, will be different than the way that you view them when you're older. The first of the 4 phases is the loosen up and tighten up. And that "and" becomes important because in some aspects of our lives, we're loosening up. We're kind of letting go. And in some aspects of our lives, we're tightening up. That underlying theme between the two is that fatherhood challenges our relationship with structure. So if we lived by a very rigid structure prior to becoming fathers, we had everything timed out and ordered, fatherhood might disrupt that. Let me rephrase that. Fatherhood will disrupt that. And that's just by virtue of new responsibilities. And because we can't predict, we can't plan for the spontaneous needs of an infant, a toddler, or even a child. On the other side, if we were a little more free-form or spontaneous, then fatherhood might require more structure. If prior to fatherhood, we would wait until being moved to clean the kitchen, right? I'm just going to do it when I feel like I'm ready to do it. That's no longer feasible in fatherhood. We need clean items in order to prepare food for our children or for our children to eat. So whether we're on the tight side or the loose side prior to becoming fathers, the actual process of parenthood requires us to hold both a little bit more flexibly, have enough routine so that there's security and consistency, and enough looseness so there's a sense of adaptability and responding to some of the spontaneity of parenthood. Because our children respond well to rhythm. They need that consistency, but they also teach us or challenge us to let go of some of that structure because they're spontaneous, unique human beings. The second phase is being dependable and being dependent. And so this is about both being responsible and vulnerable. On the responsibility or dependability side, some of us are challenged to grow, to show up more consistently, and to live out our word. When we say we're going to do something, we need to do it. Because prior to becoming fathers, we might not have experienced the importance of consistency. Meeting our friends at a bar on a Friday night, it doesn't matter if we show up on time. But showing up to pick up after school for our kids does matter if we show up on time. On the other side of vulnerability and being dependent, we might need to learn how to ask for help, to let go of our independence in some way, saying, I need to take care of everything, but instead inviting people in to take care of some of those things. Because we're not going to be able to do everything ourselves. We're not going to be able to show up for everything ourselves. We have limits. And in acknowledging those limits, we acknowledge a little bit of our vulnerability. We invite people in to be a part of a community of support. Because as fathers, we want to be reliable. We want to show up consistently and take care of our responsibilities. However, we don't want to isolate ourselves to say we need to do it all alone. So being dependable is important. Being dependent is important. And this goes hand in hand. The third phase is working through our own relationship with our own fathers. Becoming fathers ourselves means that there's a lot stirred up. Memories, experiences about our own fathers, and about what they mean to us today. In many ways, we live in response to our fathers. Whether they were present or absent, alive or gone, our fathers shape our internal template of what it means to be a father. And while we don't want to be reactionary parents, in other words, only parenting in response to our own parents, we nevertheless parent in response to those templates that we have. We're either imitating what our fathers did or reacting against them. So we might say, oh, my dad did it this way, and so I want to do it just like him. Or my dad did it this way, and I want to be completely opposite from him. And so many of these memories are shaped by our childhood perspective. Right? We experienced our fathers in our early experiences with our fathers when we were just kids. So we see it through the lens of being kids. Revisiting this as we become fathers means revisiting this as adults. We can connect with that relationship, bringing empathy and understanding, because our fathers were complex and flawed human beings. And so too, we are complex and flawed human beings. And so bringing that sense of empathy to that exploration, that reflection, means we can open up a new way of understanding our relationship to our fathers, as well as how we want to embody fatherhood. And depending upon what happened in our childhood with our fathers, I'm not looking to excuse any behaviors, but rather to re-engage with that relationship, that internal template, internal relationship, and to integrate some of that new awareness about where they were, about where we are. And in doing so, free ourselves from these reactive patterns so that we're not just parenting in response to our own parents, but we're parenting with intention. And the final phase, phase 4, is developing connection with a community of fathers. That fatherhood can oftentimes be isolating. It's usually just us as fathers, maybe living with our partner, our spouse, or collaborating with our co-parent. It oftentimes feels isolating because unlike other identities like being a student or a teammate or part of a professional group, we don't talk with other fathers a lot. I mean, when I was in school, I talked with other students about being in school. When I played soccer, I talked to other players about the game. When I joined a professional counseling group, I talked with other counselors about counseling. But when we become fathers, there's less of that community. And fathers really thrive when they're connecting with other fathers. And we oftentimes think about this in formal ways, like a fatherhood group run by a counselor or some sort of organizational structure, but it doesn't need to be that grand. Oftentimes those informal meetings, connecting with friends who are also dads or cousins or brothers or uncles, whoever it may be, reaching out to folks and talking about being a dad, because these talks kind of normalize the struggles that we're going through. And it can oftentimes expand or open us up to noticing and experiencing the joy of fatherhood in new ways. As with all of these phases, what it looks like in our life is going to change over time. It might start that we're reaching out every once in a while, and it takes a little time for us to get some traction with 3 or 4 guys that we're going to start meeting with weekly or regularly. That what maybe starts as a focus on being fathers expands to other shared interests. So too, the inverse might be the case, where groups that we're already a part of might start to focus on fatherhood a little bit more, or create space to talk about fatherhood. As we wrap up, I want to make sure that I'm reinforcing that these are not steps. We're not checking things off a list. They're themes that we encounter over and over again as we develop and grow as fathers. So too, we're going to see these in other places in this course. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into some of them to reflect larger psychological processes. And just as we will dive deeper into these in the context of the course, so too each of us in our own way will dive deeper into them, to explore them, to unpack them, and to help them take shape in our lives. Because fatherhood is a journey. And when I say that, what I'm pointing to is that this is an ongoing developmental process where through reflection, we are growing and becoming more fully ourselves. We're bringing more of ourselves out into the world and showing up more presently for our loved ones. Thanks.